and we'll start shortly. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Comenzaremos en un momento. Selecciona el botón de interpretación en la parte inferior de la pantalla para escuchar la presentación en español. Apaga el audio original para escuchar solo en español.
Looks like maybe the numbers are just starting to slow down a little bit. So I think we will go ahead and get going. I'm going to turn it over to Jackie Enriquez, our bilingual secretary, to open up with this slide real quick for sharing about interpretation.
Buenas tardes, comenzaremos en un momento. Seleccione el botón de interpretación en la parte inferior de la pantalla para escuchar la presentación en español. Apague el audio original para escuchar solo en español.
All right, thank you, Jackie. Good evening, everybody. It is great to have you all here. I'm Jamie Kingery, the principal here at Tualatin Elementary. It's great to be able to share some information with you this evening. And just for a few logistics before we get started, there is a Q&A or question and answer button on your screen that you'll be able to use to ask questions during the community meeting tonight. And we have a panel with us to respond to those. But there is also a chat button, but please only use the chat for technical support for any reason. If you have questions, things like that, then please use only the question and answer, and that will allow our panel to respond to your questions. We will do our best to respond to as many questions as possible. If there are family-specific questions, please reach out to our office, reach out to me, and we will make sure and get you information that may be specific to your own family. There is likely to be quite a large number of questions, and so we may not be able to respond to all of them during the community meeting, but as long as you have it typed in there, we'll be able to capture that, and we'll be putting together tomorrow morning a frequently asked questions or that FAQ that will be available to families. That will help guide kind of the rest of the information that we will be sending out to families from now until we are able to bring back students to campus. I do want to recognize our panel this evening. We have our office staff, Stacy Snyder, our head secretary, Jackie Enriquez, who is our bilingual secretary, is also our bookkeeper. We have Amanda Thorderson with us, who is also part of our office staff and also our after-school program coordinator during a typical year. We have Erin Gillum, our counselor, school psychologist, with us tonight, and also Janelle Cook, who is our literacy specialist and Title I coordinator. And then we also have Jerry Nihill, who is the principal at Mary Woodward, helping us out this evening as well. I want to thank Thor and Lisa, who are helping on share the presentation with everybody and our technical team. And then also Miguel Castro is our Spanish interpreter, and so we appreciate all of them helping us out tonight. I want to first acknowledge and recognize that we appreciate from the school side all of the effort and support and the partnership that we have at home with our families right now. This goes back certainly all the way back to almost a year ago in March last year when we ended up in a crisis response to when the pandemic began for all of us. As a parent, I do understand quite a bit about the balance between, the regular life of the family and then also managing school and doing that from home and what that has entailed during this time, going back all the way to last March. Our goal is to do the absolute best for all of our students, as well as taking that measured approach to safety and health while we are still operating in the context of a health crisis with this pandemic. And so one thing that we will ask repeatedly and right now for us to be able to bring back students to campus, we are asking everyone to be diligent across our community, across our staff, with wearing a mask, distancing, regular washing hands, and other hygiene pieces that are important, and also limiting groups and limiting contact between a small number of households. Really only one other household is how to be successful at that. And that will help us pull off bringing students back and keeping them in contact with their teachers and peers for those that come back to hybrid, and helping this be a successful remainder of the school year. We know and want to acknowledge that we are also asking you to make a decision at this time, which I'll explain more as we get into the presentation, but it will not take place for several weeks from now. And so we know that lends to some challenge around making a decision for the remainder of the year for having a hybrid or a 100% online distance learning model for your situation at home. And so we do want to recognize that. Right now, we're just sharing the truest picture of where we're at currently, and we will be communicating through our office and through our staff, through teachers, directly to families, with any adjustments or changes that will take place between now and when we are able to have a hard date for starting with bringing kids back. And so here's our agenda tonight. You've seen that. We will talk about kind of where we're at with the context and goals, which I've already kind of started with, what the half day will look like and its schedule, that we are still continuing to be focused on social emotional learning, so we can then be more successful with students taking in the academics and progress there. I'll talk about some of the health and safety procedures and protocols that we'll need to work with families, both on the home side and then what happens here at school. And then talk about what the online option will look like from here on out, and how to then enroll for what the choice will be for the remainder of the year, and then what that timeline looks like. And so next slide, please, Laura. All right, we know that before we start, there certainly has been a lot happening. This actually goes all the way back to March, again, when we went to distance learning initially in a crisis response to the beginning of the pandemic. In August, we had very strict mandatory metrics in place that required us to start the year online. In October, the updates provided a bit more flexibility, but the cases were too high to really make any different planning at that time. And then, as we know, in December, metrics shifted quite a bit, and also then things became not mandatory, but advisory, even though we still adhere to the guidance of metrics, which we got even more clarification on and updates on the 19th. We still know that while it is termed as advisory, that those still play quite heavily into the decision-making that we have for where we're going at this time. Next slide, please. And so given the context of where we're at, we are still relying on our practices around equity and safety to help us in our planning. But we do have a commitment to running a hybrid and an online model for families, depending on their choice for the remainder of this year. Hybrid is recommended based on how many cases of COVID-19 there are per 100,000 in our county, for Washington County. We do pay attention to our neighboring counties also. And in Washington County, a few weeks ago, it was at 339 cases. And so that was just under the number of where the metrics are right now. Last week, it was at 333. And then this week, we're down to 289, which is still keeps us in the same range, which I'll show you shortly. But that is a nice downward trend. And so we are hoping that we will all work together diligently to keep that downward trend happening. Next slide, please. All right, so here's a table of the metrics, and this is something that you can refer back to. This community meeting is being recorded, And so you'll be able to go back and look at some of the information, and the slides will be made available to all of our families. And so this is not the only time you'll be able to take a look at this. But there we are in the orange, between 200 and 350 cases per 100,000. And so we are right in that place of where we're planning transition and getting ready to then start some on-site learning down the road. And right now we're looking at mid to late March is kind of a ballpark, given that vaccination has already started for the first wave of staff in Tigard-Tualatin School District. Next slide, please. All right, so our goals, similar to when we are here in a typical school year or on campus, is to still develop the peer and adult connections, those relationships that we rely on to allow things to happen effectively at school. And there will be a need to relearn our what practices look like during the day, with routines from how to get into school to what it looks like traveling through the school to get to classroom and work with adults. And we will have a very solid plan. This is happening right now. We're doing a lot of fine tuning and getting things set up in a way that we can maintain the health and safety, and then also work instructionally with students and support their social, emotional, and academic learning. And the idea behind that is that our goal is to increase engagement of where we're at now, and also keep kids moving forward so that they can have the most successful year through now till June. Next slide, please. So the reasons, kind of the why behind a half-day model, is that it'll be more consistent than the original half-day plan that we had back in the fall, where it was going to be a cohort on a Monday, Tuesday. Wednesdays will look the same right now. And then the Thursday, Friday would have been the second cohort. And to be more consistent and more effective with students, half-day model makes more sense for 4 days a week. There'll be more teacher and peer interaction, given what that looks like while we're still maintaining safety and health. And so we will be having the pieces in place that are important about wearing masks. That's for all students and adults. We will be set up so that we can maintain distancing. There will be regular routines for hand sanitizer and hand washing, and what that looks like, as students may need from everything to use the restroom or other things like that. And they will be maintaining a similar pace to the 100% online cohort. That's something that has been a really important practice all the way starting back in September, that our cohorts of students are all moving at a similar pace, especially within grade levels and within schools. And so our teams will be working hard regardless of whether they're a hybrid teacher or a 100% online teacher. Next slide, please. And the schedule will look like, in the morning will be 8:25 to 10:55, and so a 2.5 hour window of time. In the afternoon will look the same. We have an 1.5 hours between the morning and afternoon cohorts. That will allow for cleaning protocols to take place. That will allow for teacher prep time, for them to have a lunch. And then all of our, for us, preschool through 5th grade will be on a similar schedule, but our preschool schedule will look very similar since they're in an AM, PM model right now anyway. Next slide, please. And so, like I said, they'll be in person Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday in those half-day cohorts for AM and PM. And then Wednesdays will look the same. There will still be that morning meeting to start the day, and that will be for all students together. And then they'll have the asynchronous or the work that's pushed out for tasks and assignments, same as what we're experiencing now. Next slide, please. And so one of the things we won't be doing is we will not be live streaming classes at the same time. So there won't be a teacher teaching a hybrid class and an online class at the same time. There's just not a way to pull that off that effectively supports student learning. And so that is one of the other reasons why we've landed on this half-day model, and we will have a distinct comprehensive distant learning cohort of students at grade levels, and then also the hybrid. And then so while students are at home, either in the morning or in the afternoon, depending on which hybrid cohort they're in, it will look similar to what the afternoons look like now, where they will have some small group time. They may have other services provided during those times. And so we'll be working with our specialists and staff to figure out what still can happen here at school, and then what still needs to be that time that will be a distance learning model. Next slide, please. We will have a lot of questions around kind of what the rest of the day looks like, and recess is certainly important. We know that time for socialization and things like that are critical to a student's day. We're working in a pretty small amount of time with 2.5 hours, which mirrors the morning meeting time, math and reading that we currently have. So we will be trying to do recess in a way that still supports students, to give them some movement. It may look like brain breaks or movement breaks. We will use the outside spaces when it's possible. We know that winter is not always conducive to that anyway at this point, or during the spring due to the weather, but we'll do the best we can for what guidance we have, and also to make sure our cohorts are staying together and not intermingling, to make sure that we're still taking that measured approach to safety and health. Supplies in the classroom will not be shared. Each student will have their own supplies. I'll talk a little bit more about that in some upcoming slides. But we do need the iPads to come to school, and so iPads will stay with students, whether they're at home or whether they're coming to school. They will be traveling with those. Buses will both be running for the morning and the afternoon. Fortunately, we're only planning for the elementary level right now, and so there's a little more flexibility to be able to pull that off well to get our elementary students started first. Next slide, please. So here's, I know some of the big questions are, well, how we'll decide on cohorting, and this will be similar for that AB cohort or the AM PM. And so we'll go by last name, A through L in the morning, and then M through Z in the afternoon. We do know that we'll work with families on an individual basis for any circumstances that we need to adjust. Meals will be grab and go. And so at the end of the morning cohort, our students who need meal service will be able to pick up a breakfast and a lunch, and the lunch can be eaten that day and the breakfast for the next morning. There is a plan to also cover Wednesdays, where they'll take additional meals or have additional meals provided that go with them. And then in the afternoon, they'll be taking breakfast and lunch that then can be used the next day. Next slide, please. And here's the schedule, and you don't need to memorize this now because these slides will be made available. We will share this out through our office and through our teachers, but this gives you a snapshot of what it looks like. You'll see the transition time. Arrival will be a little bit more staggered because of how the number of kids is significantly reduced. Buses will only, capacity will be about half of what it would be normally. And so there will be a little bit of a staggered drop off as we bring families in, and as we do the screening protocol and get them to where they need to be. And then school will be starting at 8:25, and then dismissal will be at 10:55. And so then the transition is built in for the afternoon cohort during that hour and a half for then the afternoon to start at 12:25. And so again, you don't need to memorize this or start jotting the whole thing down. We will be providing this to you following the community meetings that wrap up in the other schools tonight as well. And so we'll make sure you have this and that this is the start of the conversation for getting ready for hybrid starting down the road when we get to that point, like I said, in mid to late March. So we will be sharing and talking about this and making sure all the parents have as much information as possible as we go forward to knowing that we'll need to have families make decisions for the remainder of the year. Next slide, please. And so as just like where we left off back in March, we've been really focused on through distance learning with social emotional learning, and that is a high priority for all of our students and how we support them. And so we will be still maintaining our morning meetings for the morning cohort and just then the class meeting for the afternoon, but they'll be getting the same thing they do each morning right now, where we're helping build those relationships and connections that are so important to help everyone feel a part of school, regardless of the model, whether that's distance learning or in a hybrid, or when we get to something that looks a little more normal than for what we're used to. We will still have our counselor and support staff also supporting social emotional learning continuously. And then there'll be individualized supports available for students in those during times similar to how that's happening now through distance learning as well. And then there'll be some availability to what that can look like for our students when they're on campus. Next slide, please. And so, we are going to diligently adhere to safety and health protocols. We are asking families, and you'll get a little bit more information in just a minute, and then also from here on out about conducting daily screenings at home and kind of a checklist similar to what many of you may have experienced in a workplace or other situation where there's a series of questions, checking for temperature, and keeping a close eye to make sure we have healthy folks come into school. And so then there'll be a visual screen those things will happen on the bus and also on entering the school. And so if there are any symptoms that look like they may be present, then we may do a little bit additional screening with a temperature check and that kind of thing. Otherwise, we'll rely on our partnership with families to have those layers of screening to make sure that we have everybody who's healthy here at school and anyone who has some symptoms to be kept home, and we'll have a plan for how to support that as well. We will be wearing masks, as I mentioned. There will be frequent hand washing. We have sinks in the classroom. We will have plenty of the soap and hand sanitizer and all things we need to keep everybody healthy and safe during the day. And some of those things will be also available on the bus as they are traveling if they need that transportation for both cohorts. Next slide, please. I'm just going to pause for a moment. This slide is the Spanish version of that, just to help with any families who need that, and also our interpreter to maybe catch up just a bit if needed. You'll see in the picture of what a setup will look like in the classroom, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. All right, and next slide, please. Okay, so as we are bringing students back, you can see in these visuals that our students will be 6 feet apart, which will reduce the number of students that are in the class. It'll be 35 square feet per person. And so we account for adults, any support staff, limited number, and then also the students who will be in the room. We are fortunate that right now it looks like we will be able to maintain pretty small class sizes. And since each class will be split in half for a morning and an afternoon, we're looking at a ballpark of really about 15 students in any cohort on the larger side of things. And if in our classroom sizes don't allow for too much more than about 16 or 17. And so those will be about the numbers that we'll be working with, if not less. Again, students will have their own supplies. They won't be sharing any supplies. Some things will be traveling back and forth from home to school, and other things will be kept safely in their own bin, kind of cubby, to allow for them just to have access to their own supplies as we go through this time. We won't have any fabric covered items in the classroom at this time. They will really have their desk and a chair, or we may make some accommodations for standing, for maybe sitting near their desk and things like that, because we know that we don't expect them to sit there for that long a period of time in just one place. That's not something we would ask for kids in a normal situation. And so we'll be taking frequent movement breaks and things like that to help everybody kind of navigate through what the school day will look like in a hybrid situation. Let's see. We will have some student-friendly videos also that kind of give a little bit more detail coming out that we'll be sharing with all of our families to kind of share what that looks like in the day in the life of a student for hybrid. And then we will also be taking all of the questions that we answer and all of those that we are not able to answer and put them in a FAQ, or that frequently asked questions, that will be available to all of our families as a resource. And we will continue to add to that after our community meetings that end tonight for all of our schools. And make sure that we are communicating out current information, updates, or as we make some final decisions towards some things that help everybody have the best understanding of what the hybrid will look like at school, and making the best choices as we have that opportunity. The ability to make a choice through ParentView is open now, and I'll be talking about that shortly. Next slide, please. And this is, again, another one in Spanish, just to allow for that to be viewed by our Spanish-speaking families who need it. If we do have some time at the end, after the last slide, then we may be able to open it up to some question and live response to some things as well. And so our panel will be watching the questions through that time if we end up with a little bit extra time at the end. All right, next slide, please. All right, there is a brief video that we will play for you now. All right, thank you. That is obviously not the full video. That is just kind of that, here's what's coming. There'll be videos to see kind of that day in the life. It's kind of fun to see the mascots from our schools take part in that, and to see what it'll look like at the bus stop, what it'll look like coming into the school, and then also kind of the rest of the kind of daily operation for how hybrid will operate. And so please look for that coming out soon, and we appreciate all the support that we've gotten to have that available to our families. It'll make a little more clear picture of what things will look like. And so this is an important part for how we will pay attention to contact tracing, and if we need to quarantine cohorts of students. Say that there is a confirmed case, and that would be that red student A or person A, and then a close contact would be another person that would need to quarantine or part of that cohort. If a third person kind of once again removed from person A, then that is not someone who would need to quarantine. And so we will be answering a lot of questions and sharing information to make sure that is very clear, that it's not where we were back in the spring, where we thought anyone who came into contact with anyone and on down the line, that everyone goes into quarantine. And so we're not in that place anymore. We've got a lot more information. We've learned quite a bit about how to mitigate the spread and then how the spread actually happens. While we are also watching very closely any variants of the virus, which is current information happening right now. And so while we know the mitigation steps we can take with masks and distancing, frequent hand washing and limiting kind of contact between other households and that kind of thing, that as long as we're doing those things, we know we'll still be successful in minimizing and preventing the number of quarantines that might be potentially possible. Next slide, please. And so this is an example looking at at the top, an example of a classroom, and at the bottom, an example of what it looks like on the bus. There's quite a bit of information on here, but again, it's that ABC scenario where if there is only in a close contact situation, will then quarantine be necessary. And so as you can see from this, the blue would be considered person A. The green one would be that person B, and then person C would be the person who does not need to quarantine in that scenario. And so taking a look at that, we want to help everybody understand these are decisions that we won't react in haste to. When we are here together in a hybrid model, we will be making sure that we understand the whole situation. We have a great team of support in our school and outside from district folks that will help us determine what safety and health we need to move forward with, should there be a need to quarantine. And so it'll be done very thoughtfully and according to the guidance that we have. Next slide, please. All right, and so on the other side of that, for 100% online option, this is a commitment regardless of 100% online or hybrid for the remainder of the year. And earlier I said this, but it's worth saying again, is that we want to acknowledge that that we're asking for a decision well ahead of when things take place. And so our goal is just to help families understand all of the information that we have to make the best decision possible for what fits what they want for the rest of this year. And so classes may include teachers and peers from other schools in the online option. It really is going to be dependent on how many families choose 100% online and how many choose hybrid. And we will be approaching this with the intent to keep as many students with their current teacher as at all possible, because we know that is an important piece of the decision for students and families. It is also really important for our teachers. We know that they have built a relationship with our staff has built relationships with families and the students, and we want to maintain as many of those as that are absolutely possible. But we know that there will likely be some changes that need to be made, and we want to do it as thoughtfully as possible and minimize the impact. Next slide, please. And so ParentView is open now, and there will be information that I share tonight. There's also our office and staff here to support. I know that we've already sent some of that information home as well. We're asking for a deadline of February 8th. And so it's about a week and a half away or so. And so the reason why we need it in advance is we need to then see what our parent selections are, what that means to staffing, make configurations to help make sure that our cohorts are the sizes that we need them to be given the morning and the afternoon, and then also what it looks like for the 100% online comprehensive distance learning, similar to what that looks like now. And so we will, like it says, we will be working hard to maintain consistency as a high priority. Next slide, please. And so there's ParentView Instructions. There are some additional resources and videos kind of walk you through it. We also have staff available, so you're welcome to contact our office. Look for information from your child's teacher to help navigate through to get to basically 3 decisions. One is choosing hybrid or the 100% online, choosing if transportation will be needed, meaning busing, and then also what meal options or what if you need meal service. And so those are 3 important things. And so it is important for all of our families to get into ParentView. And so we will be looking for families to do that. If you're able to navigate that from here on out, that's great. If not, please contact our office. We will also be looking at who still needs to do that by February 8th and reaching out if there is any support needed that we can help with. And so again, February 8th is the timeline for that right now. Next slide, please. And so this is just a snapshot of what it looks like. There'll be, instead of new student enrollment, it'll look like a hybrid or 100% online. Next slide, please. And then also the transportation. It'll be bus, means like our school district bus. We'll be working with daycares. We also, if you have a child in daycare, we want you to work with them if it is one that you know has had transportation in the past. We're already hearing that some choices may be different than in the past. So some may have transportation and some may not, depending on what they're able to do at this time. And so we want you to be in communication with them and before you make your selection for what's possible. And then, if the other ways that your child may be coming to school. And so please pay attention to that one. And if there's anything that we can do to help, make sure we have all the information to our families, let us know. Next slide, please. And then of course the meal options. And so look for the meal option of yes, meal option would be helpful and needed, and if not. So please take a look at all 3 of those items when we get into ParentView. And so timeline, like I said earlier, for our pre-K 5 students that we're looking at that mid to late March currently, based on the timeline that it looks like we'll be able to accomplish at this point. We'll certainly keep everybody updated for when we do have a confirmed actual date to start our preschool, kindergarten, and first grade will be the first groups of students, cohorts of students to return. That will help us make sure that we've got things in place for our youngest students, especially for our kindergartners who have not seen our school campus before, and really our first graders who have not been here, who did not have a full year on campus last year and haven't been here for almost a year now, or by then will be a year. And so we want to go through a lot of those routines with our youngest students and get them set. And then after about a week, the next week next week or 2, we'll bring in our 2-3 students, and then another week probably out and bring in 4 or 5. And we will get assignment information for students and teachers' class assignments 2 weeks before the preschool, but on our campus, the K1 students come back. And so that should be happening once we have a start date. It'll be 2 weeks before that. And then, and so anyway, next slide, please. Oh, I think we're on our last slide. So we actually have a few minutes for our panel to maybe take a look. And if there are any themes that are standing out or any specific questions that may be helpful at this time, I'll do my best to answer what we can live, collect any that we're not able to, and make sure we're getting information out to families as we ask them to make choices, and also as we get ready for what's possible a little in the not so distant future now. So I don't, if there is
Jamie, there were a couple questions about curriculum in hybrid during a hybrid setting, and what would that look like overall?
Yeah, so our teachers will be using essentially the same curricula that we are now for reading and math. And so that should not feel that much different, other than the instruction will feel a little different in person. And so we will still be using Journeys and Florida Virtual for our reading curriculum, and then we'll be using math expressions for our math instruction in addition to Florida Virtual. And then I guess the other part is that one thing I didn't mention, I think I kind of went over that, is that our specials for music and PE will continue to look as they do now. Those will be not interactive instructional times. Those will be done asynchronously as they are now. There may be some possibilities to bring in maybe the music and PE teacher for some of those breaks, or to support something that may tie into reading and math, or they may come and visit some of those morning or the class meetings that we'll have. And so there'll still be some connections there. And so that's probably one to make sure that everybody understands too, of what will be part of the in-person instruction and what will still be part of the distance learning as it looks now. Anything else? I think we still have about 5 more minutes. We will have a stop time of 5:45 so that then the team can get ready for the next school's community meeting after ours. But I will need to, I guess I can, if I can rely on the panel to maybe share what questions. Oh, I did see one question pop up, that will they be meeting, and will students like gather in the cafeteria? And we will not be having students gather in the gym or the cafeteria. They will, as they come in and go through that visual screen, we will have signage and adults essentially getting students to where they need to be in their classroom, and that will be kind of their home base, so to speak. But we won't be using our gym with any regularity, if at all, at this time as we start out. We'll see where we're able to get to. We won't be using our cafeteria. Meals will be eaten at home.
Jamie, the hybrid, does that apply to pre-K as well?
The only option we'll have for our pre-K will be the in-person, and so we won't be able to maintain the distance learning for our preschoolers. We have one preschool teacher, and we will be returning our preschool back to the Tualatin Early Childhood Center. They'll be using the same space for the remainder of this year in the hybrid, when we're able to bring them back in person with our kinder and first graders at the same time.
Mr. Kingery, will Mr. Harris be reaching out to those parents with more details?
Yes, just like all of our teachers, we will be sharing information directly through our teachers to the families for what's next. And so our preschool families will need to make a decision about being in person, is really the decision, since we won't have a distance learning cohort for preschool. It will be distance learning up until we start in-person instruction for our preschoolers, and then it'll be that in-person instruction. And so preschool will largely feel more like it did in the past anyway, because they're on a morning and an afternoon groups of students.
And I would like to just piggyback on that and ask any of our preschooler families to, yes, please do go on to ParentView and select hybrid for that.
Oh, thank you. And again, I think I've seen some questions pop up. Our goal is to keep as many students with their current teachers as possible. We want to maintain consistency in all the ways that the situation allows, but we know that there will likely be a number of changes that will need to be made, depending on once we see how many families have want their children in distance learning and how many want their children in hybrid. And we'll, again, do the best we can to maintain consistency and students with current teachers, but we know that that's one of the challenging parts, and we regret that, but it also is necessary to be able to pull off the hybrid model.
Mr. Kingery, when will more specific details regarding bathrooms and specific health things at our school be released?
Yeah, so one of the pieces are those videos, that the student-friendly and family-friendly videos that are being made, where you saw some of the mascots. Those are being made right now to be shared with families. And so those should be out soon, in time for everyone to be able to make a decision with more information. And you can also contact me, contact anyone in our office, go through your child's teacher, whatever makes the most sense for you. We just want to make sure parents have as much information as possible to make their decision. And we will have all those details shared out for what is available before February 8th. That's our goal, is to make sure that there are as few questions left as possible. One of the things, I mean, I can share a little bit. I think we maybe only have, well, I think we're pretty close to the end of our time, but one last thing that I will say is that our PTA meeting is next week on Tuesday, February 2nd at 7 o'clock. And I will share any new information, any updates, and be able to also take some question and answer directly to parents who would like to come to that meeting. And so look for that link to be shared out through our classroom, through our Black Bear Bits on this Friday, and make sure that if that's something that will be useful for you, to please encourage you to join that meeting. And so if there are any other questions, get those in the Q&A now. Otherwise, I think, Thor, are we about there on time?
Yes, we'll be transitioning out of this meeting and into the next one.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank everybody for your time. I know that's a lot of information, but please reach out to me and our office and our staff so we can help you get to the best decision possible. And even though I'm kind of talking to the screen, it's wonderful to have you all be part of this evening.